Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of Tech Talk Tuesday. I'm Jason.
I'm Zach.
And let's get started with the news.
Best Buy is closing more stores around the country. They recently laid off 5,000 more employees, and they're looking more towards their online market. It is expected to increase to 40% of all their sales coming through this online market, which is up from 19% from 2 years ago.
And that's right on the heels of Fry's Electronics closing all 31 of their stores abruptly on February 24th and letting go with at least 10,000 employees. They had 14,000 in 2018. I'm not sure how many they had at the end there, but it's a kind of sort of a big blow to big box retailers and brick and mortar stores that these bigger stores are closing a lot of stores and or moving more sales to online sales. Next, we've got HP has purchased HyperX computer peripheral gaming company from Kingston. Kingston will still manufacture their RAM, their flash drives, and their SSD products, but more of the game peripherals has moved over to HP now. When this has happened in the past, we kind of sort of see a little bit of a drop in quality, but hopefully HP will keep it going and produce quality equipment and having the HyperX peripheral name.
They usually don't do too bad of a job with their computers, so we'll just have to see what happens. Toshiba announced the first hard drive featuring flux control microwave-assisted magnetic recording technology. Can hold 18 terabytes of information, and it idles on ultra-low power consumption.
Yeah, this would be nice for consumer, commercial-grade server and big hard drives for servers and large devices like that. Framework Computers is making a laptop built on the right to repair movement. This is coming after HP, Dell, Microsoft. Everybody's kind of sort of making computers harder and harder to work on.
Much harder to work on.
So
yeah.
This Framework Computer company has a modular design for their laptops where you should be able to replace the RAM, the hard drives, the video cards, the CPU without having to replace the whole computer or just buy a new one.
Even the USB ports.
That's nice. Something to keep an eye out on.
NASA's Perseverance rover has touched down on the red planet Mars. It took 7 months for the rover to reach the planet. They plan to look for signs of life capsulated in rocks around the crater site that they landed in. The rover also has an Ingenuity helicopter aboard that has yet to be tried. This would be the first time an aircraft is flown on another planet if they get it to work.
We've seen some images come back already, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty successful trip. It's anticipated the lack of availability for GPUs is going to continue on through all of 2021 and into 2022. This is brought on mainly because of the semiconductor shortage, and that's caused by a few factors, one being COVID-related issues, two being the increase in technology demand, basically. People were buying a lot more devices to work from home, and three is the US-China trade war. Those three items are causing the issues with the demand for semiconductors, and then semiconductors are not available for the GPUs and other devices. We're also seeing this in auto manufacturers, and President Biden has just released an inquiry into finding out why this is happening and how we can fix it so we don't have the demand shortage right now. So hopefully this will be fixed soon. But this has caused the price of chip manufacturers' stock to increase greatly. So that's, I guess, one benefit.
LastPass Password Manager is under speculation by privacy advocates. The company Exodus Privacy, which is basically a security researcher, found that LastPass has 7 built-in web trackers from Google Analytics, AppsFlyer, Mixpanel, and a few others. They found that 1Password and KeePass did not have any trackers in it.
So it's not something you want to see from your KeePass manager, that it has a lot of web tracking devices, even though it might be anonymized, but still you don't want to have a lot of trackers inside of your password managers. So if you already have LastPass or some of these other ones that have issues, please make sure you check into those. And Zach actually changed all of his passwords from LastPass to a different password provider, so make sure you change that over to a different provider if you can or you're worried. All right, some fast food chains are beginning the transition into AI-developed automated answering systems like Siri and Alexa kind of devices where you just go in and you just say what you want and then the AI builds it and shows you on screen. This is kind of a departure. If you guys have seen the last few years prior to COVID, some of the McDonald's and places like that would use a touch screen when you walk in, but now because of COVID, they're trying to get away from that now and move on to just a full AI ordering system. So you just go into a store, You order what you want, and then the AI displays it on screen, and you, I guess, say that's correct or not. McDonald's in Chicago is already rolling this out, and you can see some more from this here very shortly for some other fast food chains as well. All right, now on to our tech tip for today. Our tech tip for the day is computer cleanliness. So we're going to talk about that here in just a second. We're going to pull some devices out for you and be right back. All right, so today for our tech tip of the day, we're going to be talking about computer cleanliness. We're going to go through a few items to clean on your desktop as well as your laptop and what to look for when you're cleaning your devices at least yearly at the very least, but preferably around once every 6 months. So for your computer, your desktop, dust just accumulates. There's actually an intake and an exhaust on these. So depending on what your intake is, you're going to have usually like some kind of a mesh panel or some kind of device that's going to be able to be removed and cleaned. Sometimes you don't, and just the dust just all goes in here. But if you don't clean this regularly, you're going to have dust build up and eventual fan failures like this fan here, which has pretty much almost stopped moving because there's dust inside the bearings. But what we're doing on this today is we're going to show that the CPU cooler is one big area that you guys need to make sure you clean. Just blow the dust out of here. The RAM and any of the fans you have in your computer, as well as your hard drive spaces. And what we like to do is use canned air. You can actually go through and buy a device that blows air that's kind of sort of less expensive over time, because canned air gets expensive over time. But we don't like to use those kind of devices because they blow humidified air into your electronics, and electronics don't usually like having humidified air blown into them. So we always use canned air, and if you want to do something besides canned air, what we like to do is actually use a vacuum cleaner and vacuum stuff out, because then you're not blowing humidified air directly into your electronics.
As far as laptops go, it's basically just a downscaled version of the desktop Jason just talked about. Most laptops have a spot for a fan here that you can blow into. And then as well, if you know how to take a laptop apart, you can always unscrew all the screws here and pull the bottom off and then blow it out.
Yeah,
and then if you have a detachable battery, you can go ahead and detach that too before you do it, just to mitigate any sort of risk of static discharge or anything like that.
Right, and with both devices, you want to make sure you guys have the power turned off prior to cleaning them. But on the laptops, most laptops just have one CPU fan. Some of the nicer ones that have gaming peripherals, like a gaming video card, might have fans on both sides, but make sure you just blow the air into the vents so you guys get that dust out of there and keep them going good.
Some laptops we get in, they also get crumbs down here in the keys and on the screen, and that's a good spot to blow out too as well.
Yeah, especially the keyboards. Occasionally, like dust or debris and crumbs will get behind a button and not work very well, but once you blow that out, it works much better. But for the main purpose of this is designed to have computers last a lot longer. So if you have a CPU cooler that's just chocked with dust and it's 10 degrees Celsius normal over the temperature it is normally, that's just going to decrease your life over time. So maybe the CPU is only going to last 5 years instead of 7. But that's the reason why you want to keep things clean.
You had that DVR that one? Was it a DVR?
Yeah.
That you peeled that layer of dust off and then it started working again.
Yeah, it overheated, so it kept on shutting off. But there was actually a thick layer of what looked like a pelt covering up all of the grooves. Like for instance, on here, there was just such a thick layer of dust on top of it that I actually had to peel it off and like rolled it off rather than blowing it out. So that's the worst case scenario. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get on to our product development of today.
So our tech discussion for today is going to revolve around online privacy, how you can increase it as a user, and then how you can really lock it down later on into the talk. So a lot of people wonder if they even need to worry about online privacy. What can they do about it? I have nothing to hide, so why should I care? And that just bothers me really bad.
Yeah, but have you ever had a conversation where you're like, I want to talk about this ski jacket, for instance, and you're talking to your friend about that, like I'm talking to you like, hey, I saw this ski jacket's really nice, and then you see all these pop-ups that related to ski wear or ski jackets. That's the kind of stuff that we're talking about here and how it relates to your online privacy, because while you might not realize it, a lot of devices, whether it be Alexa or your phone or your internet search history, are all keeping track of what you look at. So that's what this is for today.
So the first thing we suggest when increasing your online privacy is to switch search engines you're using, which is not the same as a web browser. We'll get into that in a little bit. But a search engine like Google, when you pull up the web browser and then Google pops up and then you can type into the computer, that is the search engine. There's other search engines, a popular one being DuckDuckGo, that can very easily replace Google and Microsoft's Bing. Google and Microsoft, they use targeted ads system, in which as you go around on the internet, they place trackers on the internet, and then that sends information back to Google and Microsoft. And then they store that and they build a profile about you. And then they target ads and tailor your experience off of those targeted ads.
A lot of time that's anonymized, so that way it doesn't know who the person belongs to. Sometimes it's actually by that person specifically. A lot of times it's just anonymized to where it says this is a number, and it gives that number a search history and a profile, and it says that this person's looking for this or this person's looking for that. But there are a lot of better sources out there that for search engines than just Google.
DuckDuckGo does not build that profile for you, while they may still give you anonymized ads and collect stuff like that, which you can turn off, which we will also get into in a little bit. Like I said, they don't build that profile and they don't track your activity across the web.
So adjusting your software settings on apps and social media, one thing you can do is that's popular amongst software companies is to change your settings that you allow them to do different things. For instance, if you downloaded Farm Simulator on your Facebook profile, when you install that, it has information on there like what information do you want to share with Farm Simulator. Well, that information can be selected to a certain point, so you shouldn't always have those checked. So be sure you look at those and see what it actually wants, and then check off anything that you can. Some things are required to be installed, like say just your email is required, but what's not required is maybe sending them your whole friends list. So make sure you guys have those kind of things unchecked.
Applications have these privacy settings that you can change. Operating systems have these that you can change when you're installing Windows. A whole screen pops up of about 10 different things that you can turn off that we always turn off when we're installing for our customers and for ourselves.
That's correct. We always turn everything off besides maybe on laptops, which occasionally we'll leave on the location profile for be able to find your device if it gets stolen. But if it's not just for that, we turn everything off on those when we do the installs.
I always turn my location stuff off. Web browsers also have the ability to go in and alter what information sends to them or what does not go to them.
Yeah, and if you did install Windows or you did install a device, you want to go back and check, you can always go back through those settings, whether it be on Facebook or some kind of profile settings, or go through your Windows settings on your computer and turn those back off if you already have them on.
You're not out of luck once you install it if you don't select it the first time. You can always go back in at a later time and change that to whatever you feel like having it at that point. For web browsers, you can install anti-tracking and ad blocking add-ons to the web browser, and you usually want to disable third-party cookies always. But you can also completely disable cookies with an exception that sometimes breaks websites and they don't function properly.
Yeah, web browsers also have extensions where you can install different plugins. Like let's say you want to have an ad blocker or a password blocker, things like that, to where it doesn't track that kind of information. I think we usually have 2 or 3 different kind of ad blocker extensions installed on Chrome. But Chrome itself is actually a very RAM-intensive program. Whenever we're just sitting there with it open, it's using about 2 to 3 gigabytes of RAM. So if your computer only has 4 gigabytes of RAM, that's using a lot of your available RAM. Most computers are starting with 8 gigabytes or 16 gigabytes right now, but Chrome is a very RAM-intensive program. If you can do a different program besides Chrome, like say Brave or DuckDuckGo or even Safari or Firefox, those are much better about being more utilitarian with their resources.
Some popular ad blockers are uBlock Origin and AdBlock. They block ads, they block trackers and fingerprinters that websites throw at you, and they can block cookies and third-party cookies if you choose to target those.
Yeah, pop-up blockers as well. Web browsers that are implementing their own blockers here soon are Firefox, Brave, and Safari, which is going to be helpful because what we see a lot of times is people that are less inclined to know what to do when the pop-up comes up. When something pops up and says, your computer is infected with viruses, please click here to clean, they don't understand the difference between that being a pop-up that's just a random source, probably either a full-on malware piece, or just at the very least something that's going to track you and try to send you some information to buy.
Yeah.
And the difference between that and like a Windows pop-up that says, hey, I found a virus, please click here to delete it or remove it.
Yeah, with these ad blockers and tracking blockers, that will relieve you from getting those fake pop-ups when you're browsing the web. Next, we want to ensure mobile devices are clearing photo metadata before you post it. So this really involves your settings on your device.
Yeah, any of your phone devices or your tablets nowadays take all this metadata when you take a picture. So you take a picture, it tells you GPS data, time, where you're at. It gives all this information, and if that information is still tied to that picture, you can actually be giving all that information to who you're sending it to. Like, I'm going to post this on Facebook. Well, Facebook's now going to get all this information about where you were, what time this happened, and you just don't want that to go over to Facebook as well, or any kind of social media device like Instagram or wherever.
Right, and anybody who can see your photos can click and download those photos, and if that metadata is attached to that image, they can run any specific programs on it and extract that information to look at.
So you might want to look at programs that will allow you to transfer those images to a different source and then remove that metadata before posting them.
You can also have predisposed settings on your phone to keep this metadata from popping up in the images that you take. I usually always keep my location services off unless I absolutely need them. So if you take a picture while your location services are off, it won't inscribe that metadata of where you were at when the photo was taken into the image. And there's different things that you can turn off here and there. You will typically always get the state that the camera was in when the photo is taken, but as far as location goes and stuff like that, that can be fought against.
All right. Next, we're going to talk about how to use a VPN.
Our next tip would be to use a VPN, which is a virtual private network. So anytime you're on a local network, someone with the right software, which is typically free, can basically sniff, which is what it's calling in our world, that network and see whatever's happening with the people using the network, where they're going and stuff like that. People can see where you're browsing, and then on HTTP websites, which is not the same as HTTPS, HTTPS websites are encrypted, and you cannot see the information going between the computer and that website on those. HTTP websites without the encryption, anything you type into that website, say if you log in or you put in big information, that information can be captured by that sniffing software and analyzed and looked at, viewed in plain text by the person analyzing it.
Right, so every device that you have that accesses the internet or has access to the internet, whether it be your phone, your computer, your laptop, your tablet, your TV, all have a digital fingerprint called an IP address. And this IP address is what they use to track all this information. So you guys can use a VPN to disguise that or mask that IP address and send that IP address to Germany or Italy or wherever you guys want to send that one to, but at least it's not tracking your specific IP address from your home and says that you are in Salina, Kansas, and here's what you've been watching or looking at or downloading.
We'll try to paint it a little clearer with a picture. So if you're sitting in a coffee shop and you're using a VPN, and say somebody there is sniffing the network, so the person sniffing the network, when you're using the VPN, is only going to see your traffic going from your computer to the host of the VPN. The issue being without a VPN, they would see the traffic from your computer to where you're going. The VPN blocks that individual from seeing where you're going. And then on the flip side of that, the end track, or I guess where your destination, the destinations you're going to. So when that traffic comes in, they won't see it coming from your public IP address, like Jason just said. They'll see it coming from the IP address of the VPN you're using. So it kind of cuts out that middle section where people can track where you're coming from and then where you're going.
Right, and then once you have the VPN set up on your computer, it's actually encrypted as well. So let's say it's not just people that are on the network sniffing, but you want to just hide your information from Cox or Comcast or whoever actually is your ISP provider. Once it's encrypted, they won't be able to see that information either.
And this isn't entirely foolproof, and we don't condone trying to hide your activities from law enforcement.
If it's illegal activities.
But if law enforcement can very easily get a warrant, send it to the VPN, and then the VPN, some VPNs will send the information to them.
Yeah, both of us, we just don't like being tracked. We don't like having people know where we're going and what we're doing. We don't want to have privatized ads like say, hey, I saw that you're looking at that ski jacket. Here's some ski jacket ads. We just don't like that kind of stuff. It just feels invasive.
It does, very much so.
So as Zach was mentioning before, using a different web browser, not just a search engine, but a web browser completely like Google, Chrome, Firefox, Edge, all those are different web browsers. So what you use to access the internet is through a web browser. Edge is the one that comes with Microsoft, but people always download Chrome. I don't like Chrome as much right now is because it's so RAM intensive, but whereas like Brave and Firefox are much more robust programs that don't use all their resources and don't track as much information as Google does.
Yeah, as a company themselves, they have kind of a moral standpoint to not collect as much information. Google's pretty bad about it.
And that's how Google makes a lot of its revenues, from actually providing information. These companies make billions off of collecting and selling your information. So if you're not getting paid for that, you might as well try to use a different browser and get comfortable with Brave or Safari or Firefox.
Yeah, Apple's Safari is getting better about it. They're very good at keeping other people out of your stuff, but in terms of them looking at their own user stuff, it's still a bit problematic.
Yeah, they want to keep watching their own users, but they are better about not just selling it randomly.
And then if you want to get more into the weeds about it, you can get deep web browsers like Tor, Freenet, and I2P. Definitely the most popular one is Tor. It's also known as the Onion router. It gets that name from actually how it works. So when you use Tor, your traffic will go to 3 relays, which can be anywhere in the world. People just set them up for other people to use. This all happens automatically. Your traffic will hit one relay, it'll go to another relay, it'll go to another relay, and then it will go to its destination.
So this will show up that you're not in the United States in Salina, Kansas. It might show up that you're in Italy, and then if they go beyond that, well, that next server is in Rome, and this next server is in
back in the States.
It just transfers it, bounces it around. That way you aren't just having all your information just out there invisible.
It's much in a sense like peeling an onion. You peel the first relay, you peel the second relay, you peel the third relay, and then you're where you need to be.
I think 3 is the default setting. I think that if you actually want to, you can change how many nodes you want it to go through. But again, as you do that, you're increasing the time that it takes for information to travel back and forth. So there might be a little bit of time for it to slow down versus like just being on the browser just arbitrarily through Google and not having a VPN or a Tor, but definitely more on the privacy side. But if you increase that to, let's say, 5 nodes or 10 nodes, well, that delay is going to be much longer than it would be if you just were on the internet directly.
Yeah, it's definitely going to slow down how fast you're traversing the internet and stuff like that. 3 isn't too bad.
No, that's
3 is not too bad at all. And these deep web browsers can be used on the ClearNet, which is we can differentiate without getting too much into it. There's the ClearNet and then there's the deep web. The ClearNet is basically
just
what the majority of people are using, what everybody's using, basically.
Yeah, and the deep web is more of like your privacy. You want to be hidden and usually do illegal activities or just get information. If the deep web was one thing, like somebody stole your information, the deep web is where they would sell it.
Usually, yeah. So Tor can access, or I guess any of these deep web browsers can access either side of the internet. You can use them normally on the ClearNet, and it's typically not recommended to do that. But then you can also access the deep web services. Normal web browsers don't have the ability to do this, and they're very anonymous because of the way they work, like the relays that we just discussed. Lots of illegal activity does happen on the deep web, but it's also not so bad. You can actually go and watch an individual browse the deep web, and you'll see there's plenty of normal stuff on there. It is Some Ordinary Gamers on YouTube.
Yeah.
I'll plug him right now. I like to watch him quite a bit. But it's really cool to see the different kind of stuff that he runs into. Some of it's bad and nasty, and some of it's just walls. You can just scroll through, and it's pictures of giraffes. And it's crazy.
And going on the deep web is not illegal, and then not everything on the deep web is illegal activities. It's just that that's where you can go to be on a very anonymous, private kind of sort of network.
Yeah, some people, like people who are under oppressive governments, will use these services to get out to the world and say, hey, this stuff's happening in my country. One in which the web browsers they get there don't let you out to the world. They stay literally within the country.
We've seen that here recently. Most recent would be the case of Australia, which is kind of sort of Facebook's limiting Australia's access to be able to post stuff, or if the government is doing it, but you can actually do a VPN and say that you're in France and still access Facebook that way. But there are some uses that are legitimate and there are some uses that are illegal. So just keep them on the legitimate side, I guess.
To be fair, Facebook did reverse that ruling.
Yeah.
They're going back on it, obviously, because that was a terrible decision. But it is what it is.
All right, so next we're going to talk about how we can use different operating systems.
So even more further into the weeds than switching a web browser into something like deep web browsers or something like that, You can entirely switch operating systems from Windows or Apple.
We talked about this last week when we were talking about the difference of who has as much usership. So Microsoft has the most viewerships for operating systems, and then it was just switched to Chrome.
Yep.
And then Apple had around 7 or 8%. After that, there's a few other ones, but those are the big three. Ubuntu or Linux is the fourth one after that, and there's some other ones as well.
So Microsoft is a good operating system, but by far the worst in terms of privacy. They collect quite a bit, even if it's anonymous. Apple's better, like we said. Their Safari web browser is getting better in terms of privacy. But Apple, the company themselves, is still pretty bad about collecting information about their users. And then that fourth option we talked about, there are tons of different Linux distributions out there that you can download. Some of them are very privacy focused.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the issue is that for a lot of devices, let's say you have a printer. Well, HP makes the printer. HP doesn't usually make a driver for every operating system. So while there's 80% of the devices out there have Windows on them, HP is going to make those drivers for Windows, but might not make a driver for Linux. They've gotten better here over the last few years of making drivers for different devices. Just know that you probably will have to have several different operating systems if you want to be able to access this and be private at the same time.
Yeah, some of the privacy-focused operating systems that are built on Linux are Tails OS, Parrot OS, and Cubes OS. And there's some other ones like that, but these three I just mentioned are the most extreme. You can also do Manjaro, which is an Arch-based. I'm not sure how Ubuntu is about their privacy.
Much better than Windows.
I would imagine so. So you could do Ubuntu, or you could do Linux Mint.
And the last thing you can do is to actually install a bootable disk on a USB with an operating system that's already just boots from the USB directly.
Yeah, so at this point, you would take everything that we just talked about and combine it into this last step. You would use a different operating system and place it onto the jump drive that you just plug into your computer. It's actually not too difficult to do if you look into it and read about it and learn how to do it. And we're fully capable of doing it if anybody was interested in doing such a thing.
Yeah, let's say you're going to go over to a different country and you want to visit there and you're going to use a net cafe and go there, use their computers. Well, maybe you don't want them tracking all your information either, so you can just boot up the drive on the USB, and then you should have safety and security of being on that operating system rather than the net cafe's one that you would use just for a few minutes.
Yep. The most popular combination of this is to run the Tails operating system on one of these drives that also uses the Tor network,
right?
Deep web service. So when you use stuff like this, there's no hard drive data saved because it's on the jump drive, and the jump drive actually resets when you unplug it. So when you plug it back in, in most cases, stuff like this, it automatically resets. You can have jump drives like that save information, but in this case, it does not. So that data is erased, and the tracing usage of what you're doing on the web becomes extremely difficult to dig in and access.
So do you think it's worth trying to do the VPN and the Tor at the same time?
It's not. It's not at all. No. Tor has its relay system, which in a sense acts like a VPN. And it's free. Some majority of good VPN services are paid for. I would never recommend a VPN service that's free. They can be good, but when stuff's free, you're typically the reason they're making money.
Paying for it in a different way, whether it be data or information, but ads, for instance. I purchased a lifetime subscription to a VPN probably about 10 years ago. And it had 5 devices on it, and I've been using that ever since, and it's worked really well. But they have monthly subscriptions to a VPN or monthly subscriptions to a Tor, but you need something rather than just being out there and open.
We understand that was a lot of information. I put a couple notes down here, and there will also be tons of links in the description to click on if you want to see a different search engine, or if you want to see a website for a different operating system, or if you want to see the website for some of these deep web stuff and even some of the Linux stuff here. But I noted down 3 things that the viewer, you, should do right after this video is to switch to DuckDuckGo, You want to adjust your privacy settings and the software you use, like Windows, any apps you use, some of the web browsers you use.
Social media.
Social media, definitely, yep. And then you could also switch web browsers from Google Chrome to Firefox, Brave, or if you're an Apple user, or you're probably already using Safari.
And you can always shoot us an email at support@jabitpc.com. That's support@jabitpc.com. If you have a question or just want to issue a concern, we can be happy to look at that for you as well.
You can always drop a question in the comments too.
Thank you guys for watching. Tune in next week for another Tech Tip Tuesday.
Till next time.
Thank you.